And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo. We got another great show for you. My guest, Rachel Wolkenstein, who's here to talk about Mumia Abu-Jamal and the dramas and the tribulations he's been going through. Former death row prisoner, still being held in incarceration in the state of Pennsylvania. And you know, I've been very close to Mumia's case and following it very closely and wanting to see him free for a long time, and we're hoping to get him free and make every contribution we can towards that, and that's why we're here, because to get him free, we first have to keep him alive. And the state, you know, they're trying to get to that death penalty any way they can, right? You have to be careful of that.
Paul.
Absolutely. So, Rachel Wolkenstein, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Fine. And could you maybe begin for folks who might be from another planet and tell us who Mumia Abu-Jamal is and why we should care?
Okay, well, Mumia has been in prison now for 33 years. And he was a political journalist. He was a former Black Panther Party member. He was a defender and supporter of the MOVE organization. And he was known as a journalist who actually fought against police brutality. He fought for the rights of everybody, economic, social, whatever. And they went after him. And he was framed up for the shooting murder of a police officer. He was beaten on the scene. He was almost killed. He was shot by a police officer at the time, and they framed him up thereafter. The whole issue of what happened during the trial is a whole other story or long thing, and all the evidence that's come out in the past 30 years of his innocence, and love to talk about that at a later point. Now, they have kept on trying to kill Mumia. He was sentenced to death. He was kept in death row in solitary for he was in solitary for 30 years. And finally, after many legal challenges, and about 15 years ago, a federal court judge decided or determined correctly that his sentence to death was illegal, the way the charge was given to the jury, and that judge 15 years ago reversed that.
And that's a reversal, but the original trial judge, I mean, that deserves a minute or two of our time, because there was some horrendous things that happened in that trial where it was totally prejudiced from the first second it began, with the judge, who I forget his name.
His name is Sabo.
The original judge, Sabo, who basically treated Mumia as if he was guilty from the first day.
Absolutely. Sabo was actually called a hanging judge. He actually sentenced more people to death than any other judge in the entire United States at that time. And all the evidence was really falsified against Mumia, confession that he never made, not allowing a police officer who said he never made that statement to testify in court. I mean, these are just things that even were apparent at the time of the trial. I represented Mumia and was co-counsel during the 3 evidentiary hearings from 95 to 99, in which we brought out huge amounts of additional evidence of the frame-up and his innocence, and I was actually in charge of the investigation during that whole process.
So you know Mumia personally. I mean, you see him. When was the last time you saw him?
Oh, a few weeks ago, actually.
Okay.
I spoke to him about a week ago on the phone. I've been not only a political collaborator and a defender of his in terms of public campaigns since 1987, but as I said, been legal counsel for him in different ways at different times, and co-counsel during the hearings against Judge Sabo. I was arrested by Judge Sabo in the court.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me about this counselor.
For arguing, for actually getting up there. It was 10 days before Mumia was scheduled to be executed. It was a big deal, literally 10 days beforehand. And we were making arguments challenging both the death penalty, a lot of things, but including the death penalty against him, and how it was not only unconstitutional, but the way it was implemented in terms of bringing death charges against people in Pennsylvania, and also the whole question of the jury, the fact that the jury excluded African Americans from the jury, and we were challenging all those issues. And we had to make subpoenas. We had subpoenas against various administrators in the court system to come and provide evidence, and Judge Sabo denied our subpoenas. They quashed the subpoenas so that we could not even present that evidence in court. And it came in one morning, there was an order on our attorney's table saying, I've quashed it, we've had hearings about it, and I've decided against you. And I got up and I said, Judge, as part of my job was doing a lot of the arguments with the judge, and say, we never even had the oral argument. We never even did this. We never had a chance to argue with it.
You quashed it before there was any argument or discussion or anything.
And the order itself said that, in fact, it had been argued. I got up and I said, Judge, we need to go over this, and he said, sit down, counselor, be quiet. And I said, Judge, Your Honor, Your Honor. And he said, you're arrested. And he took me out of the courtroom.
Did you ever work with Bill Kunstler?
Yes, I did. In fact, Bill Kunstler was very helpful.
My hero.
He was very helpful. He was one of the early public defenders of Mumia before it became an international cause celeb. And he was very helpful during that whole hearing in providing additional advice and support to us in many,
that time
many
he
ways.
didn't get arrested.
No.
He let you get arrested that time.
It was a short arrest. It was a very short arrest.
Right.
But the point was, is this judge quashed all our subpoenas, didn't prevent us presenting any evidence. The point is that Mumia then 10 years or 5 years later wound up getting a federal court judge that said the death sentence, not his whole conviction, but the death sentence was illegal, and he should have either a new trial or he should be given life without parole. And what people in New York don't appreciate, and a lot of states in this country don't appreciate, is that in Pennsylvania, life is life. Life is a life sentence. There's no such thing as parole. So to sentence somebody, give somebody parole in a murder charge means they stay in prison for the rest of their life. In any event, that case, that issue, one issue was litigated up to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals and to the Supreme Court twice. And in the end, the Supreme Court did not try to overturn the Third Circuit, which said that this death sentence was illegally imposed.
So the prosecutors attempted
over and over again
to have the death penalty reinstated.
Exactly, exactly. And all that time, Mumia sat in solitary confinement on death row. Finally, after the second time the Supreme Court would not get involved in it, the powers that be, which went from Edwin Rendell, who before he was the head of the Democratic Party, chair of the Democratic Party, before he was, yes, and before he was the governor, and before he was the mayor, he was the district attorney. And he was the district attorney in Philadelphia who prosecuted Mumia, and I have every reason to believe through evidence that I have that he was actually very, very instrumental in making sure that Mumia was falsely convicted.
Okay, and of course we know that if he's the head of the Democratic Party, he's a big supporter of Hillary Clinton.
Yes, right.
And as a big Clinton supporter, he is someone who supported putting a lot of people in jail and having this 3 strikes you're out mentality.
Right, and the death sentence.
And the death sentence that were used to against the people of color most, and that today we're trying to often get stuck as a Republican thing, but really it's sourced with the Democratic Party.
And also one of the major legal implementations of the war on crime, the war on drugs, that was done through the Clinton administration that dealt with getting rid of habeas corpus, the right to challenge your sentences, was done by Clinton. And that law was passed on April 24th, 1996, which is Mumia's birthday. And it was literally the year after we had the major attacks on Mumia's conviction. And this is not a coincidence.
That they wanted to remove habeas corpus in order to remove, in particular, Mumia's ability to
challenge his case. And the widow of the dead police officer, Maureen Faulkner, who's made her whole life career on this case and against Mumia, not looking for who really killed her husband, by the way, sat on the dais with Clinton when that bill was signed. And that bill was one of the main things that helped reinforce the war on drugs and what now has become mass incarceration in the United States.
Right. But in this city, it was stop and frisk and broken windows. All of that came out of that. Right?
Exactly. And Mumia finally got out of death row because they were afraid to bring his case back in court. And so a deal was made, effectively, that they would say, okay, we're not going to try and retry the case.
That's the last thing they wanted, is a retrial without Sabo as the judge, without a hanging judge, with the public's eye on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so what they did is they said, okay, so we're just going to let you have a life imprisonment without parole sentence. And they did that secretly. There was no opportunity for Mumia to go into court and challenge it, which there are still legal means to do it. At any rate, so that was back in 2012.
And where can people get more information? Do you have a website?
There are a lot of places they can get information about Mumia directly, from thefreemumia.org. website from International Concerned Family and Friends, from the campaign to Bring Mumia Home, and my own website has a ton of information because I've worked with Mumia and written fairly major
that's your
things about
name,
it. RachelWolkenstein.net.
which you can see at the bottom of the screen here, and you'll be
Exactly.
able to go just .net
and I've written and spoken around the world about Mumia's case in terms
Right.
of the legal stuff.
And I would suggest viewers who are interested can sign up to your mailing list and get the regular.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because I do send out substantial amount of material on his case.
Right.
And one thing is what you invited me to come here to talk about,
Right.
which is in fact the latest thing they're doing to try and kill Mumia, which is that he's been in prison for all these years. It turns out that he got hepatitis-C when he was shot back there on the streets of Philadelphia, December 9th, 1981.
And just because people don't, he was actually the officer stepped on the blood bag.
Yes, that's right.
While he was in the emergency room.
Yes, that's also true.
Actually put pressure on it to force the liquid back into it,
Yeah.
and cause him agony, like a torture type of situation.
But this was after he was shot, and he was shot through the lungs to the liver. Then he was beaten on the street. The main police officer initially did not want to take him to the hospital, was ordered he was to go to the roundhouse.
Sounds like that Kai Gurley case in a way,
Yes,
too. Very
yes,
similar to what's
yes.
coming out today in the Kai Gurley case,
Yeah.
that the officer didn't even, his wife girlfriend had to come and give him mouth-to-mouth,
right. Well, these
CPR.
are Mumia's case, and the way that we're going to talk about in terms of the medical stuff, and this just is all these legal things, is both unique and what happens every day. It has both components to it, because he is a man who was targeted for his political views and who he is and what he represented.
He had a radio show.
He had a radio show. He was
Right.
actually, everyone in the African American community in particular knew who Mumia Abu-Jamal is. He has the most beautiful, gorgeous voice. And he was listened to by everybody.
Where can people hear his voice?
Can hear it on Prison Radio, prisonradio.org. Again, is Noelle Hanrahan has been recording.
Good friend of mine, Noelle.
She has been recording his commentaries since 1993, I believe, and she posts all the time. Mumia calls her many times a week, and she records what he does, and you can find them there, and they're beautiful.
Prisonradio.org. Easy to remember. That's good. And
Right.
you can hear Mumia's beautiful voice. It's just a wonderful voice to hear, and you should definitely check it out.
Right. Now, and in addition to that,
And
the
a great
content
writer, too.
and the content, when she talks about social
course.
commentary all the time, and
Yeah.
what's going on in every possible way.
Right.
So, in event, what happened to Mumia now is like 18 months ago, he developed this rash that was very, very discomforting.
You have a picture here, right?
Well, I have a picture for later. Okay, so here's, let me show you. Okay, so Mumia, I'll jump ahead a little bit.
Yeah, I can even hold it so you can.
Hold
I'll hold it. Yeah.
Okay, so 18 months ago he developed a rash. This is now from about a year ago, this picture. And this is a picture after what happened to him was he had this rash, it wasn't treated, he was in the prison infirmary for about a week. He lost probably 40 pounds in about 2 weeks. In the course of 6 weeks, he lost 80 pounds. The prison did nothing about this. All the while, this rash went all over his whole body. As I said, he was in the infirmary. They didn't do anything about it that helped him, except they gave him steroids that he had an allergic reaction to. And in the end of March 30th, a year ago, he went into a diabetic shock, and he had gone to the infirmary in order to have his blood pressure.
How did that happen? Describe that. What is a diabetic shock? What does that mean?
People know that diabetes is a function of your insulin and your sugar not coordinating, correctly, and it can be caused by many different things. But his sugar levels had been rising, and he had been in the infirmary, as I mentioned, for his skin that wasn't really treated properly. It was mistreated. But they did get his results from these blood tests they were doing, and it showed in the beginning of March his blood sugar level was up to 407. Now,
wow.
Yeah,
and it should be less than 100, really.
Less than 100. So less than 100. 100 is actually on the borderline high. It's normal, but it's in the borderline.
Right after you ate dinner or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
So his blood sugars had been around that, let's say a month before that, but March 3rd, it was 407. And they did nothing about it. And 3 weeks later, he went to the infirmary to have blood pressure taken, which was there's some reason they were doing that, and he actually went into a coma because his blood sugar had risen so high that he actually just went out.
Where did he go into the coma? Where did this event happen?
Fortunately, in the end, that happened while he was in the infirmary. He basically fell down. He has no recollection at all over, what exactly happened to him.
When did this happen?
This was March 30th last year. And another little side of the story is that Mumia was feeling so badly that he had actually asked those of us who visit him regularly to not visit him because he was so uncomfortable from this itching and all the other stuff that he just couldn't handle the visits. And
do you get to bring in, does a prisoner get to have their own doctor or to have anybody?
No, absolutely not. No, not. You're not allowed to, even if you want to pay for your doctor, nothing. Who runs the prison medical system is actually, it's run technically by the state, and the Constitution provides that prisoners are entitled to medical care. Now, you and I, there's no right under the U.S. Constitution for people, citizens or people living in this country to get medical care. But because you're in the custody of the state, there's developed legal law from the Supreme Court
There's where
that
they
says
have social medicine, right?
Yes,
single payer. That's where a single payer is in prison.
It's a single payer, except it's privatized.
Yeah.
It's privatized, and its actual purpose is to not provide any care and to provide the least amount of care that's possible and way below quality care. So what happened with Mumia is that he was looking so bad, he was not speaking coherently to friends of his in the prison, other prisoners who he associated with, he went to the law library with and all that, told him that there was something wrong with him. And he wasn't compos mentis himself because of the impact of all these things that happened.
He didn't even know if he was.
No, he wasn't aware of it.
People were saying to him,
yes, and
it doesn't seem right.
One of them is a man named Major Tillery, who's a lifer himself. And about Mumia is older than Mumia, he's like 65, and he is somebody that actually not only was talking and telling Mumia that.
How old is Mumia?
Mumia is 60. He's 61, he just turned 61.
Same age.
Yeah. So then what happened is Major Tillery went up to the superintendent at SCI Mahanoy, a man by the name of John Carestes, and said, "You have got to take care of my guy. You have got to take him to the hospital. He's dying." And Carestes said, "Who are you talking about?" He said, "Mumia Abu-Jamal." And he said, "Well, you take care of yourself." And Major, his real name is Major. Major said,
Yeah, sure.
Major said, "That's taking care of me. He's my guy. I want him taken care of the way I need to be taken care of." And what happened with Major Tillery is once we learned, when Mumia, I'm jumping ahead a little, got out of the hospital, and it became known that Major had solidarized with him, which is one of the many things, but one of the things the prison system cannot stand is prisoners acting in solidarity of each other. And so what they did with Major is they precipitously transferred him out of the prison, and they wound up framing him up on a disciplinary charge of some contraband, and they put him in the hole for 4 months. I'm sorry, and I know this because
they put a 65-year-old man in the hole for 4 months for a contraband violation.
Right. Well, this is standard.
Who's in life.
Right, but this is totally usual.
Totally usual, right.
Right, it's a totally harassment type of thing.
Well, they decided, didn't the president just a few weeks ago say we won't do it anymore to people under 21?
Yeah, well, we'll see how far that goes also, but yes, in the federal system.
But the thing is, up until that statement, take it with a grain of salt, they even put children in there.
Yes, they did, just like they had children who were life imprisonment.
The young man who died just recently in Rikers Island.
Right, exactly. So we have that situation coming up. So Mumia goes into diabetic coma. He gets rushed to the hospital. We learn about it, and there was a huge campaign immediately to get him care, to actually be able to see him, for his wife to be able to see him, his lawyers to be able to see him, first to see him. And so at any rate, a few days later, he gets out of the prison, and they've given him other treatment. And that's actually when this picture was taken, which you showed people how thin he is. Right. But then 2 weeks...
He used to be a bigger guy than that. He lost a lot of weight. Look how that's cinched in really tight.
Right,
he
exactly.
Lost a lot of weight.
And then a couple weeks later, I mean, I've gone to the prison many times with Mumia's wife, Wadia. So Wadia and I went there a couple weeks. I was there the same time.
Is that her there?
That's Wadia. It's not the best picture of her because she's over him. I just want to point out this is what Mumia's skin looked like. I don't know if you can really see it,
let's
but
zero in on that.
it's very, oh, that's good. That's
there
good.
You go. You can see it all.
You can see how thick it is and scaly. To me, it looked like almost like reptilian. You know, like, crocodile bags. You see people do it, and it was horrible. And so
and it's very uncomfortable too. It itches.
It itches all day and night. Now, the week later, we took a picture. Wadie and I were there again, and we had this picture taken of him. And again, if you can see it, it shows his neck and everything was almost like turkey. Right. You know, it was like all but his ear, this is all like flaking. So on the one hand, he had these huge scales almost on his, and thick plates on his skin that you could see in his arms. But he also has all this scaling, and it's almost like right there is like it was a hole, literally a hole on the side of his ear. And Mumia would say to Wadea, we were there, she said, do you know what all this is? And he says, yes, it's like I am losing my whole skin. And this is what he was going through.
And this is related to the diabetic situation?
No, we're not sure. It's not the diabetes, but it comes back to what does Mumia have? It turns out that after this episode where he got worse after he got out of the hospital, and it got so bad that they finally, and we started putting pressure on. Mumia had other lawyers who started getting ready to file a lawsuit for him, which they knew about. They had Mumia living permanently in the infirmary. There was a whole international campaign, which was absolutely essential, demanding that Mumia be able to have his own doctor come and look at him.
And what do people do? They call in and they send letters?
They call in, you send letters to the Department of Corrections, and again, where that is I think I have a number here, which I can read to people.
Okay, we'll give that out. Yes, yes.
Okay, so the number, even though it's here, is
Let me
to
see if we can put it up.
Well, this is for Major Tillery, but it's the same number here, is to call John Wetzel, and the number is 717-428, 1109.
Right.
And he is the commissioner, right, he is the commissioner.
So instead of saying Major Tillery, put in, let's see that one more time, we'll have a time. Instead of Major Tillery, you say Mumia Abu-Jamal, SCI Frackville.
Right, well, Mumia is at SCI Mahanoy. But that's for letters of support.
That'll go anywhere.
It'll go anywhere. But the point, I can give people Mumia's exact address. But for John Wetzel, who is the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, it's important to let him know that Mumia should get the treatment he needs. And the treatment he needs, just to come back to the point, is he needs treatment for Hepatitis-C.
So when did they find out finally that it was Hep C?
Okay.
A lot of people in the Hep C movement watch this show. People who have or have cured themselves of Hep C and are part of movements in order to educate people and to get the money for the cure when we know there is a cure now. So I want folks to listen to this carefully because this is your poster child.
Right. Okay. So the point to understand is that Hep C is one of those diseases, like a silent killer. People got this virus from drugs, from sex, from blood. And before 1992, the blood was not tested. I mean, that's how Mumia got the Hep C. After he was injured, he had many blood transfusions. That has to be the source of his Hep C. So it doesn't show up very often for 20 or 30 years when people develop liver disease. However, in the more recent period, they have begun more studies and seeing there are any number of what they call extrahepatic results, symptoms that are developed, or secondary
symptoms. Hepatic means liver, having to do with liver.
Right, symptoms related to the Hep C. And what they are can be anything from skin disease is a big aspect of it. Sometimes it's
untreated Hep C can come out in the form of skin disease.
Right, exactly. Very looks like psoriasis. It would test the same as psoriasis, cirrhosis. Not cirrhosis, but you know what I mean.
Cirrhosis is another problem with the liver.
Cirrhosis is a liver problem. I'm sorry. But psoriasis and the other type of skin disease that people have a lot, but similar. But in any event, they also arthritis, leg pains, joint pains can also be symptoms of having Hep C. But the killing, those are the secondary symptoms. What Hep C does is it destroys your liver. And sooner or later, people with Hep C develop cirrhosis of the liver and liver cancer and liver disease. So, but that doesn't show up sometimes for 20, 30 years. So what happened with Mumia is he had all sorts of tests. The prison got enough pressure and got worried enough because of the pressure that they sent him to a hospital, a good hospital called Geisinger Medical Center, not the most important thing. And he had like a week's workup of everything. He was tested to see what type, maybe he had cancer, we had leukemia, you know, what type of things would be creating this horrible skin disease he had. And we knew that he had Hep C about 2 years before, but they considered it, you know, not really active because there was no direct signs of liver damage as far as they were concerned. So one of the doctors that began working on Mumia's case, a wonderful man, Dr. Joseph Harris, who's with Doctors Without Borders, he's here in New York City, and he has done work on, you know, HIV and Hep C in the community, and he also has been in Africa and all that. And there's a particular type of very, very skin disease which looks very similar to what Mumia has.
Virulent.
Very virulent, with these plaques, with the shedding, the unceasing itching, and all the other stuff.
We only have a minute and a half, so
oh, wow.
I know,
okay,
right?
All right. Well, in any event, the punchline of all this is that it was discovered that, or he was the first person to diagnose that Hep C was the source of this real skin disease. And then there's a whole other thing. You're going to have to bring me on again to talk about the legal fight that's going on now to get Mumia the treatment, which will affect 10,000 other. There's a cure. There's a cure, a pill, a simple pill to take once a day for 12 weeks. The problem is, in the United States, it costs $1,000 a pill. In Egypt, it costs about $4. I think in India, it costs $10. And in the United States, even though it's considered to be the protocol by all the medical officials, it is not given to prisoners. It's not given generally to people. It's not automatic for Medicaid, Medicare.
It costs over $100,000 in the United States.
Yes.
However, if you were in India, it would cost $100.
Yes, exactly.
I see. And they will not give it to him?
No. So there's a whole lawsuit and the whole story.
I thought there was a requirement that you had to give the best treatment available.
No. In prisons, you only have to give treatment, not the best treatment.
Okay. All right. We have half a minute. I'm just checking the time. We have half a minute to go, so I know it's not enough time. We'll have to have you back, Rachel Wolkenstein, to talk more about this.
I'd be very happy to.
And there's a legal battle going on right now to get him this treatment, right?
Right, exactly.
So folks can go to your website, rachelwolkenstein.net.
Right.
They can learn more about this, and then they can get involved in this movement, send letters, find out the address, the phone numbers, and help Mumia get the treatment he needs, because we all need to help him do that to survive. Obviously, it's very important. A member of our community must be supported.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
It was great. I don't know, we have a few seconds here.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say the impact of all these fights for Mumia is for everybody, because there are hundreds and thousands of people, millions of people in this country that have Hep C, and 25% of all prisoners have Hep C.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank
all right.
you.